Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNODC, I would like to welcome you to this ancillary meeting in the margins of the 14th United Nations Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Given the hybrid format of this Congress due to COVID-19, this event is broadcasting live with panelists taking the floor from Kyoto, myself from Vienna, and other speakers have taken their time from their busy schedules to record a video message to a global audience across the world. Therefore, I would like to wish you a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Today, our objective is to showcase some of the accomplishments achieved by National Prison Administration in their work on rehabilitation of prisoners, supported by the Global Program for the implementation of the Doha Declaration, with the generous funding support of the State of Qatar. International standards, including the Nelson Mandela Rules, stipulate that imprisonment should not be limited to the deprivation of liberty alone. Rather, it should include opportunities for prisoners to obtain knowledge and skills that can assist them in their successful reintegration upon release, with a view to avoiding future offending. As we celebrate today the International Women's Day, we should not forget those women in conflict with the law. In many countries, women prisoners are more likely than men to be first-time offenders in prison for non-violent offenses. However, penitentiary and criminal justice approaches are largely shaped by the needs of male offenders and prisoners with regard to prison regimes and health care, post-sentencing processes, and prisoner rehabilitation programs. Gender-based discrimination in prisons and in the criminal justice system hurts women and harms our societies. The adoption of the Bangkok Rules a decade ago by the General Assembly stands as a milestone in the struggle to acknowledge and address this discrimination. The Bangkok Rules offer essential guidance on meeting gender-specific healthcare and mental health care requirements among women prisoners. While rehabilitation covers a wide variety of activities, including medical and psychological treatment, counseling, and cognitive behavior programs, we have been supporting countries in developing projects in three core areas of education, vocational training, and work in prisons, with a view to contribute to the employability and social reintegration of prisoners upon release. Our reflection on the work done over the last couple of years allow us to share the tangible stories and actions with you, including by beneficiaries of the work undertaken by the Global Program, which highlight the results achieved around the world so far in this important area. Before introducing our speakers, I would like to make a few announcements, in order to have a smooth online experience of this event, we kindly request the participants to keep microphones muted as well as their cameras off. This will help to improve the viewing experience. Thank you so much. Without the cooperation, vision, and support of the government of the State of Qatar, we wouldn't be here today. And this is why I am very pleased to give the floor to our first keynote speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Sultan Al Mansouri, for his opening remarks. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alejandro. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Yes. Good morning to you, and a very welcome to everybody. Where are you? Good morning or good afternoon or good evening. I wish you all the best. And thank you all so much for joining us this day. We have a very nice weather in Kyoto and a very sunny day. So we are as well enjoying the exhibition and enjoying the conferences. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to participate in this meeting to highlight an important aspect of our fight against crime and our efforts to reform criminal justice system through promoting prison-based rehabilitation programs and post-release services to foster prisoner social reintegrations. Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones." Rule 4/1 of the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for Treatment of Prisoners, the Nelson Mandela Rules, stated that the purpose of a sentence for imprisonment are primarily to protect society against crime and to reduce recidivism through a purpose can be achieved only if the period of imprisonment is used to ensure so far as possible the reintegration of such persons into society upon release so that they can lead into law-abiding and self-supporting life. Doha Declaration of the 13th Crime Congress recognized the need for the human prisons, conditions and rehabilitation and social reintegration of the prisoners into community. The global program for the implementation of the Doha Declaration dedicated one of its 4 pillars to rehabilitation and social reintegration of prisoners. It includes technical guidance, materials, and tools on presence-based rehabilitation and capacity building programs. The prisoner rehabilitation component supported prisons administrations in developing prisoners rehabilitation programs in 11 countries. In these countries, the program effectively used the local infrastructures and the capacity that was already in places. This complementary approach was one of the best characteristics of the activities carried out under the global program. The Doha Declaration Global Program proves that the rehabilitation and social reintegration of prisoners are one of the best and most cost-effective ways of preventing the re-offending, with the significant benefits not only for the individual concerns but also for the public safety more broadly. Among the merits of Doha Declaration Global Program Prisoners Rehabilitation Pillar, it gives a good example of the role of international cooperation to bring national prisoner rehabilitation in line with the international standards. I take this opportunity to thank the UNODC leadership and experts for their dedicated and tireless efforts to make this component of the global program a great success, and hope that more efforts shall be followed to achieve this important aspect of crime prevention and criminal justice, taking in consideration the harmful effects of the COVID-19 on this sector and the need to double our efforts to mitigate the disaster's effects. Finally, I take this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment of State of Qatar to support the UNODC efforts in this field for prison reforms and the rehabilitation of prisoners. Also, the State of Qatar is a member of the Friends of Mandela Rules and committed to the implementation of these rules. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your kind remarks. We are very proud, of course, ourselves as well of our joint collaboration under the global program and the achievements to date, and we look forward as well to our continued cooperation in the future. Let us continue now with the video message from our next keynote speaker, Ms. Valérie Lebeau, Chief of the Justice Section of UNODC. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, UNODC has continued to find ways and means to promote the rule of law and work towards enhancing our crime prevention and criminal justice efforts to ensure a holistic and multi-stakeholder approach. I'll pass now the video message of Ms. Valérie Lebeau, please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to open this event together with our partners, the State of Qatar and Japan. Following the adoption of the Doha Declaration at the last UN Crime Congress in 2015, UNODC launched, with the support of Qatar, a wide-ranging global program for the implementation of the Doha Declaration, aiming at promoting the rule of law and human rights. The global program includes a component dedicated to prisoners' rehabilitation. Under that component, UNODC has been able to support numerous member states in advancing a rehabilitative approach to prison management. And we are truly grateful to the State of Qatar for making this work possible. Prisons are an essential part of the criminal justice system, but they are often a low priority for governments and a weak link in the justice system. They tend to be under-resourced and unable to cater for even the most basic and life-sustaining needs of prisoners. Prison settings have been hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not surprising, as prisoners typically have a low health status already upon admission, and this gets aggravated during their incarceration by prison overcrowding and poor prison conditions. This not only affects prisoners, but also their families, visitors, prison staff, and society at large. This last year, UNODC has been working, including under the Doha program, with prison administrations in many countries to respond to the acute health and safety challenges created by the pandemic. Turning now to the topic of our event, promoting the social reintegration of offenders, I would like to remind us that prisons by themselves do not have a rehabilitative effect. On the contrary, they often exacerbate the challenges faced by individuals who have come in conflict with the law. UNODC promotes the effective use of alternatives to incarceration. Whenever they are appropriate, non-custodial measures and rehabilitation within the community should be the preferred option. When prison sentences are necessary, they need to be implemented in a way that fosters the ability of prisoners to lead self-supporting lives upon release. Since the vast majority of prisoners will eventually return to society, it is essential to actively promote their social reintegration in order to protect society from crime. The immediate period after release is critical and difficult for all prisoners. Social reintegration support, therefore, must not end at the prison gate. Even the best prison-based rehabilitation program will be undermined if former prisoners find themselves without any post-release support. Under the Doha program, in line with the Nelson Mandela Rules, and despite the challenges raised by the pandemic, UNODC has supported prison-based education, vocational training, and work programs in 11 countries, from Asia to Africa to Latin America. As an example, in El Salvador, we have facilitated access to university studies for male and female prisoners. Let me emphasize here that it is important to offer gender-responsive programs for women prisoners and provide women with vocational training which is not limited to stereotypical activities considered suitable for women. In Bolivia, for instance, we have provided vocational training for women prisoners in the construction sector, because this is where there is a demand for their work. In the state of Palestine, vocational training in electricity has been provided to male prisoners. In Tajikistan, we have established metal and wood workshops, and in Kyrgyzstan, baking, sewing, and shoemaking production facilities for both male and female prisoners. These are just a few examples, and we will hear in a moment the experiences of Namibia and Indonesia. I would also like to mention that we have developed in the last years, under the Doha program, new technical tools translated in 5 UN official languages, and these tools have been developed with the support of numerous experts, practitioners, and the civil society. They include the roadmap for the development of prison-based rehabilitation programs, the handbook on anti-corruption measures in prison, the introductory handbook on the prevention of recidivism and social reintegration of offenders, which was updated to fully reflect the provisions of the Nelson Mandela Rules. We have also developed a guide for the creation of national brands of prison products and a handbook on the classification of prisoners. All these tools have been developed as a result of requests from member states indicating that they needed guidance in these specific areas. To conclude, allow me to reiterate our appreciation to the State of Qatar for having enabled our office to conduct these valuable activities. On behalf of UNODC, I also want to reiterate our commitment to support member states in their efforts to create rehabilitative prison environments embedded in decent, safe, and healthy prisons settings that foster the social integration of offenders and effectively reduce risk of reoffending. I thank you for your attention.
I now give the floor to our next keynote speaker, Mr. Satoru Ohashi, Director General of the Correction Bureau of the Ministry of Justice of Japan, as the representative of the host country of the 14th UN Crime Congress. With the newly adopted Kyoto Declaration, we look forward to continuing our support to member states in implementing concrete actions to advance responses addressing crime prevention, criminal justice, and international cooperation. So we can have the video message, please.
Thank you, Mr. Alejandro. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for honorable opportunity to make an opening statement on behalf of the host country, Japan. At this ancillary meeting, UNODC focuses on one of the key issues in the field of criminal justice, which member states are currently working on promoting prison-based rehabilitation programs and post-release services to foster prisoners' social integration. At this occasion, United Nations Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, I would like to extend my sincere praise to UNODC, which is trying to achieve further development in this field by dealing with this subject. The agenda covered in this meeting focuses on the importance of supporting measures for the rehabilitation and social reintegration of prisoners into the community. It goes without saying how important this subject is in the current criminal justice of each state. Rather, we can say that the importance of dealing with this issue is increasing year by year in current society. When we discuss this agenda topic, we cannot avoid mentioning the Doha Declaration, adopted at the last meeting in Doha, Qatar, in 2015. The 13th UN Congress. Article 5 of the Doha Declaration states that to implement and enhance policies for prison inmates that focuses on education, work, medical care, rehabilitation, social reintegration, and the prevention of recidivism. It emphasizes that we should focus on the treatment for prisoners as well as their rehabilitation, social integration, and prevention of recidivism. I remember that the member states clearly agreed and supported this challenge by reaffirming the necessity for each member state to seek out efficient measures to realize this philosophy with their utmost efforts. I would like to pay the highest contribution to the previous host country, Qatar, which led to the agreement on the Doha Declaration as a great milestone for member states to enhance measures for prisoners' rehabilitation and social reintegration. In addition, Article 5 of the Declaration also mentions respect for the Bangkok Rules. It says the necessity to treat female inmates in consideration of gender differences and the importance of treatment focuses on the rehabilitation and social integration according to the unique needs of female inmates. It is another significant issue in our modern society. Furthermore, the Declaration also refers to respect for the revised draft of the standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners. It is fresh in our memory that this draft was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2015 and was enacted as the Nelson Mandela Rules. In the rules, it is intended to ensure the consideration of offenders' human rights and the effect of treatment for offenders by securing the standards of treatment for inmates. And at the same time, it is stipulated that the inmates' rehabilitation and social reintegration are the goal we should aim for. As we can see in these major international norms, there is no doubt that it is important to secure not only crime control and detention of offenders, but also the development of measures to enhance their rehabilitation and the reintegration into society. As I mentioned at the beginning, the main subject is the issue regarding the rehabilitation programs in prisons and the post-release support for inmates. Today's host, UNODC, has been making various efforts to realize great benefits to public safety more broadly since the 13th Congress, paying due respect to the Doha Declaration and following the idea, investment into corresponding programs for prisoners are one of the best and most cost-effective ways of preventing their reoffending. UNODC formulated the roadmap for the development of prison-based rehabilitation programs and provides support and technical guidance to develop rehabilitation programs in close collaboration with relevant government organizations and stakeholders, including civil society and the private sector. Besides, UNODC also carries out activities to educate the local community on how important it is for their community to establish the framework for effective prevention of recidivism by rehabilitating offenders. We should keep proceeding and share our knowledge so that each member state will achieve further development in the field of the criminal justice by sustainable and active action by UNODC, leading to the realization of the society no one left behind. Dear participants, I have no doubt that each member state would have understood the importance of prisoners' rehabilitation and the reintegration into society, and would have made unstinted efforts. In today's workshop, by combining the wealth of experience that UNODC has accumulated with knowledge of practitioners and experts, it will be effective for the rehabilitating prisoners and their social reintegration. I hope this effort will lead to the next stage of this subject. Thank you for your kind attention. It's been a pleasure being with all of you today.
Now we turn to our distinguished panelists. I have the pleasure to introduce today Mr. Rafael Jamuniela, Commissioner General of the Namibian Correctional Service, Mr. Troy Devdassen, Deputy Director of the Correctional Rehabilitation Services of Singapore, Mr. Reinhard Silitonga, Director General, the Indonesian Directorate General of Corrections, and Ms. Olivia Rowe, Executive Director of Penal Reform International. Today's reflection will allow us to share good practices and experiences of our unique program that promotes the rule of law and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in an innovative, forward-looking way. Our first panelist, Commissioner General Rafael Jamuniela of the Namibian Correctional Service, will share how his country has become a key partner and a friend of the global program in the specific area of prison rehabilitation. Sarah, if you please put the video of the Commissioner. Thank you.
Dear participant, first and foremost, let me greet you from Namibia, land of the brave. I want to express my sincere appreciation on behalf of the Namibian Correctional Service and indeed on my own behalf for this invitation. We always appreciate opportunities where we get the chance to thank those who have assisted us in delivering our mandate. I also want to thank you that despite the COVID-19 pandemic, you are still making it possible for us to push our agenda forward. Dear participant, the Namibian Correctional Service is mandated to provide safe, secure, and humane custody of offenders, rehabilitate, and reintegrate them into the community. This is a mandate that we have realized that it cannot be achieved without the contribution of stakeholders and partners. It is for this reason that the Namibian Correctional Service has put a lot of effort in creating formal relations with organizations such as UNODC. I must say that UNODC has been one of the most successful partnerships with the Namibian Correctional Service, as we have registered so many achievements together, in particular health care and human treatment of inmates. However, since January 2018, when I first had the engagement with Ms. Judith Akchev of the UNODC, we started focusing on measures to support the rehabilitation and social reintegration of offenders into community. This is where the Doha Declaration Global Program came in, and wonderful achievements have since resulted from the funding received from various projects. There are 5 projects running at 4 correctional facilities in Namibia, which are funded through the Doha Declaration Global Program. These are the hydroponics project at the Hobabis Correctional Facility. The majority of participants are male state president's decision, SPD patients. SPD are inmates with chronic psychiatric condition. The swing and basket waving project at the Windhoek Female Correctional Facility. the soap making and hand sanitizer project at the Windhoek Correctional Facility, participants are sentenced male offenders. The card making project at the Walvis Bay Correctional Facility, where participants are sentenced male offenders. A number of successes toward rehabilitation and reintegration have been gained from this project. These are increased the range of rehabilitation programs available to inmates. The hydroponic project as well as the sewing and basket weaving project present a greater level of inclusivity as it involves SPDs and female offenders. An increase in the rate of employability for inmates participating in the project. Idleness in the targeted facility has been reduced, and this offsets negative incidents. An increased rate and quality of inmate nutrition has been achieved, as some of the produce is used for inmates' consumption. Increase in inmate morale, motivation, and an overall improvement in the discipline. An increase in the general hygiene. Inmates from project are now able to financially support their family and purchase some of their essential needs. The soap making project has been particularly responsive to the COVID-19 pandemic, as soap and hand sanitizers was produced in response to the pandemic. In addition, the sewing project continues to produce masks for the department and other organizations. Here are some testimonies from the offenders.
Okay, my name is Busi Guide, and I have 20 years sentence, and I'm currently working at the soap making project. First, it was a struggle for us because we didn't have soap to keep ourselves, our beddings, and ourselves clean. Now that we have a soap making project here, we are really happy for the correctional service and the rehabilitation effort that they are affording us, so we can be productive while we are still incarcerated.
Ondaka ange fimbo hei nangala ndamona ne kuchambolo kunangala kakuna sita kutinge heitameke nimbale oyaka kwa ferange okwendi fange ko sitala kange no sitala fina ndi mona no kulinga sibe fe ndiri ngandi lipopi bino kuyaka oshi ya kwa ferange sama hei tungu omadiro ange akale ki itsakidira no ko shimbale kuche itulako oluvale la fapeni sho itungu imbale ya yoloka ino mapya yoloka. Ese ikajapo ikanangala efimbo losongo talenti yo yakwa ferange no hocha sika kwali italelwapo ondaka mpewa ni maliwa ndikale heilande efe wadange ya teidimi mbalo sika kwali o family yange hayu kwana.
Okay, my name is Olivia, and I am part of the card making project. Previously, I used to do cake baking, decorations, but when I was sentenced, I was given training in card making projects. So I got the skills of working with the silhouette machine by making cards, making event gifts, and I am more than willing to give my experience that I received here to other inmates also, and to my kids one day, because you are learning to be relaxed, you are learning not just to do things with your hand, but also digitally you are doing cards. And it is a very positive project because you learn to be patient, you learn not to stress too much, you learn to think creatively and do things more with your hands.
These successful experiences, thanks to the generous contribution of the state of Qatar, can be easily replicated to bring positive change to many more offenders. For instance, in the Namibian Correctional Service, we are still looking at potential projects such as poultry farming, arts and craft, aquaculture, textile manufacturing. We are still strong on the premise that inmates who participated in these projects are significantly less likely to return to correctional facility after release and are more likely to find employment. However, a lot still has to be done. More offenders still have to be presented with these opportunities. I strongly believe that partners like the UNODC, through the Doha Declaration Global Program, are important in the support of such interventions. In conclusion, let me once again thank the UNODC for the significant support that we have received and continue to receive over the years. I believe that the role of the State of Qatar through the Doha Declaration is making tremendous difference all over the world, a difference that makes this world a better place. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Namibia for this, and in particular to Commissioner General. We've had an excellent collaboration, and it's been great working together. And that is the showcase of the achievements that we've managed to get in Namibia. I will pass now as well to Singapore, which is another country with which we have cooperated in the past, and our work has greatly benefited from their support and guidance. Our next speaker is Mr. Troy Devdassen, Deputy Director, Correctional Rehabilitation Services from the Singapore Prison Service. Sarah, if you please give the review. Thank you.
Good afternoon, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I am Troy Devdassen, Deputy Director for the Psychological and Correctional Rehabilitation Division at the Singapore Prison Service. I would like to thank UNODC for organizing this ancillary meeting to discuss how prison-based rehabilitation programs and post-release services can better support prisoners' social reintegration. It's a privilege to once again be able to work with the UNODC. In 2018, Singapore and the UNODC jointly organized a regional training workshop on strengthening offender reintegration in Asia. And last year, Singapore contributed to the UNODC handbook on the classification of prisoners. Thank you for the opportunities to share some of Singapore's strategies and experience in providing rehabilitation programs to our offenders, both within and beyond prison walls. For those who are unfamiliar with Singapore, let me start by sharing some key information about my country. Singapore is an island city-state in Southeast Asia. We have almost 5.7 million residents from various races, cultures, and religions. Singapore has a robust criminal justice system with tough laws against crime, highly professional law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies, as well as an independent, efficient, and effective judiciary. Our unwavering commitment to the rule of law has allowed us to foster a peaceful and harmonious society. In addition to these efforts to prevent and to fight crime, Singapore recognizes the important role that rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders plays in reducing reoffending and improving community safety. The government has thus heavily invested resources, people, and expertise in close partnership with the community in the rehabilitation of offenders. From a traditional custodial agency faced with challenges of overcrowded prisons, manpower shortage, and poor public perception, the Singapore Prison Service, or SPS, underwent a major transformation in the 2000s. The transformation saw the expanded role of SPS staff, who were called captains of lives, from being just custodians to also being mentors, coaches, and role models to those under our charge. We inspire and steer offenders to take ownership of their rehabilitation and to be responsible and contributing citizens. To prevent reoffending, SPS adopts evidence-informed rehabilitation and reintegration practices. Just a month ago, SPS released our annual statistics. Our 2-year recidivism rate for the 2018 release cohort is 22.1%, a significant improvement from the 1990s, where recidivism rates were over 40%. In 2020, we continued to expand community corrections to help offenders better reintegrate into society, and have placed about 3,400 offenders in the community, a 42% increase from 2019. SPS adopts a true care approach in the rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders. This means that there are continuous and coordinated efforts to address the risks and needs of offenders inside prison, and these are followed through in the community upon their release. In prison, we prepare offenders for a crime-free life by changing their mindset and equipping them with relevant knowledge and skills. Outside of prison, where the released offenders face challenges in the community, aftercare intervention seeks to scaffold them with immediate term support measures so they can start their reintegration journey on a stronger footing. We also have strong partnerships with Yellow Ribbon Singapore, community partners, and volunteers to raise societal awareness of the need to give second chances to ex-offenders and their families, generate acceptance of ex-offenders, and inspire community action to support their rehabilitation and reintegration. I will elaborate on some of these programs later. In Singapore, we believe that every offender has the potential to live a crime-free life and contribute positively to society. Before I share more about the specific programs and services, let me talk about our rehabilitation approach and the factors necessary to make it work. Underpinning our rehabilitation approach is a team of committed uniformed officers and civilian psychologists and correctional rehabilitation specialists. SBS also has a strong network of passionate community volunteers who work in partnership with SBS in delivering programs in prison and support release offenders in the community. Firstly, our evidence-informed research forms a fundamental component of our rehabilitation system. While we draw from international research findings, we have also conducted our own local research to validate and contextualize evidence that can be applied to our country. Secondly, we developed psychology-based correctional interventions based on evidence-informed practices in the corrections literature, such as the risk-need-responsibility model, the good lives model, and desistance theory. Our psychology-based correctional interventions play an important role in the rehabilitation of offenders, stimulating readiness to change in offenders and helping them to understand the factors which contributed to their offending behaviors. These interventions provide structured learning and application of pro-social skills to aid offenders in developing a reintegration plan that addresses their unique life situation, challenges, and goals. Thirdly, we apply the principles of implementation science, which is the scientific study of methods to promote the integration of research findings and evidence-informed interventions into policy and practice. As part of implementation science, we evaluate our programs on both process and outcome. Our evaluation studies have shown that high-risk offenders who underwent evidence-informed interventions in a holistic intervention environment with structured aftercare had significantly lower reoffending rates by 10 percentage points compared to offenders who did not receive the same interventions. Effectiveness in rehabilitation interventions cannot rely on a one-size-fits-all approach. Therefore, we employ a differentiated approach that considers factors such as level of needs, age, and gender. We assess our offenders' risks and needs to match them to the most appropriate interventions. This matching is vital to ensure the appropriate level of intervention is given to the offender, allowing for maximum effectiveness and efficiency in service provision. Let me elaborate on an example of our differentiated approach as it is applied to meet the needs of women offenders. In recent years, our research findings have corroborated international research on the importance of gender responsiveness in our work with women offenders. As such, we have trained both our operations and rehabilitation staff who work with women offenders to adopt a gender-responsive rehabilitation approach, which focuses on emotional well-being, community and family support, and seeks to equip our women offenders with coping skills for their roles as mothers, daughters, and partners. Our gender-responsive psychology-based correctional program for women offenders with a current substance abuse problem seeks to reduce their risk of drug reoffending by providing holistic gender-responsive intervention. This includes increasing their self-efficacy to manage cognitions, emotions, and behaviors that lead to substance abuse. We recognize that most offenders are confronted by a range of social, economic, and personal challenges that might hamper their rehabilitation and reintegration. As such, it is important to provide opportunities in prison for them to address these challenges. During their time in prison, offenders can participate in various programs, such as family programs, religious programs, work programs, skills training, education, arts programs, and befriending programs. In line with our own research that informs the importance of strengthening offenders' social capital to promote desistance from crime and prevent reoffending, curated family engagements help offenders maintain contact and sustain ties with their families throughout their incarceration. In addition to physical visits and e-letters, SBS has introduced teleconferencing and video conference facilities to enable family members to see and talk to incarcerated relatives without having to travel to the prison. This was especially helpful in the current COVID-19 climate. In the pre-release phase, Offenders are offered skills training, career coaching, and job placement, among other services. During the pandemic, job interviews continued, but were held over video conferencing to ensure that offenders leave prisons with a job. This will help them in their reintegration upon release. Offenders who have accommodation difficulties after release are also referred to halfway houses and interim housing assistance. Earlier, I mentioned that desistance theory is one of the rehabilitation theories that is incorporated in the design of our interventions. Hence, in addition to looking at recidivism as an outcome, it's also important to adopt a strengths-based approach and celebrate small successes in an individual's desistance journey. Additionally, our research highlights the need to focus on building strong social support system, rebuilding family relationships, and setting pro-social goals for individuals. Most offenders require support during the transition from in-care to aftercare. SPS provides step-down aftercare support and supervision through community corrections to facilitate the smooth reintegration of offenders into the community after their release from prison. Suitable offenders can be placed on various community-based programs, such as the Home Detention Scheme, Work Release Scheme, and Halfway House Scheme, towards the tail end of their sentence. Under these schemes, supervisees will not only be offered counseling and case management support, but also ongoing employment support. SPS's efforts alone are not enough. Strong community support has and will remain key in helping offenders live crime-free and productive lives. SPS works with various community partners to support the reintegration of our ex-offenders. Singapore implemented the Yellow Ribbon Project, YRP for short, in 2004, which aims to 1. Raise awareness of the need to give second chances to ex-offenders and their families. 2. Generate acceptance of ex-offenders and their families in the community. And 3. Inspire community action to support the rehabilitation and reintegration of ex-offenders into society. Without community acceptance and support, ex-offenders would find themselves stepping into a second prison post-release, one with invisible bars of suspicion, mistrust, and discrimination. The community holds the key to unlocking this second prison. Through YRP, we hope to promote a more accepting society that is willing to give ex-offenders a second chance and making good. In a public perception survey done in Singapore in 2018 and 2019, 8 in 10 surveyed were accepting of ex-offenders and willing to support their reintegration into society. We are encouraged by the strong public support for second chances. The YRP has inspired similar campaigns in other countries such as Fiji and the Czech Republic. In 2019, events organized under YRP included the Yellow Ribbon Prison Run, community art and poetry exhibition, and culinary and songwriting competitions. Incarceration not only affects the individual, but also affects the families and communities of the offenders. The Yellow Ribbon Community Project, an upstream intervention program driven by community volunteers, reaches out to families of offenders to ensure that their basic needs are addressed through financial, education, housing and employment assistance. Through such engagement, vulnerable children could also be identified and connected to various services in the community. As at end 2020, the Yellow Ribbon Community Project has over 1,200 community volunteers on board and reached out to over 15,000 families. Apart from the Yellow Ribbon initiatives, we have the CARE Network, formed in the year 2000. It is an alliance of various social service agencies and government organizations dedicated to community engagement, coordination of aftercare efforts, and enhancing service delivery for ex-offenders and their families. Over the years, it has expanded to include over 100 community partners, including social service agencies, religious groups, family service centers, halfway houses, grassroots organizations, corporates, and schools. Offenders have unique risks and needs. Their rehabilitation and reintegration require us to adopt evidence-informed approaches with good support and acceptance from the community. With such support, offenders can be successfully rehabilitated to contribute towards a safe and secure society. Singapore would be happy to share more details on our rehabilitation strategies with countries who are keen to find out more. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Indonesia has become one of our showcases countries. We're grateful for this partnership and very proud of our joint work together with the Second Chance Foundation, supporting the rehabilitation of female prisoners at the Semarang Correctional Facility. I am pleased to pass on the floor to Mr. Reinhard Silitonga, Director General of Corrections in Indonesia, for his video statement. Thank you.
Excellencies, the representative of the State of Qatar, Ministry of Interior, Ms. Valeria Lebok, Chief Justice Section, UNODC, Mr. Satoru Ohashi, Director General of Correction Bureau, Ministry of Justice Japan, Mr. Rafael Hamunyela, Commissioner General Namibian Correctional Service, Mr. Troy Jack Tafat Hassan, Deputy Director Correctional Rehabilitation Service, Singapore Prison Service, Ms. Olivia Rowe, Executive Director Penal Reform International, Mr. Marco Teixeira, Senior Global Coordinator, UNODC Global Program for the Implementation of the Doha Declaration, Mr. Alejandro Mata, Justice Section, UNODC. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, would like to thank the UNODC and the government of Japan for organizing this side event and for inviting me to deliver a speech. It is indeed an important forum to promote prison-based rehabilitation programs and post-release service in order to foster prisoners' social reintegration. The United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners rule for stipulates that the purpose of sentence of imprisonment or similar measures deprivative of a person's liberty are primarily to protect society against crime and to reduce recidivism. Those purposes can be achieved only if the period of imprisonment is used to ensure, so far as possible, the reintegration of such person into society upon release, so that they can lead a law-abiding and self-supporting life. Today, we would like to share some practice of prison-based rehabilitation and reintegration in Indonesia. Our prison system is striving to provide education, vocational training, and work, although it's not yet able to provide access on a scale that can sufficiently benefit its overall prison population. However, there is increasing recognition of the importance of rehabilitation programs in prisons. In addressing this challenge, we have also established cooperation and collaboration with community-based entities now in Indonesia as the correctional-based community group, including benefiting from continued collaboration with UNODC. Globally, prison-based reintegration and rehabilitation programs have taken innovative ways to support the objective of rehabilitation and promote other causes, such as protection of the environment, sustainability, biodiversity, and the climate. While innovation is increasingly crucial, the main objective of prison-based reintegration and rehabilitation programs to rehabilitate and reintegrate prisoners should always be in mind. Indonesia has set example of how prison can be provide effective rehabilitation program. We have 679 correctional facilities that are housing more than 250,000 prisoners, or 151% of capacity, designed for 132,107 prisoners. The male prisoners make up 94% of the prison population, 237,038 prisoners, where female prisoners are only 12,733 people. This number includes 1,808 juveniles that are placed in 33 juvenile correctional facilities and 4,666 elderly prisoners. Indonesia correctional system is carried out for the purpose of guaranteeing the protection of rights, improving the qualities of life of inmates and juvenile inmates to be aware of their mistake, improve themselves, and not repeat the crime they commit, so that they can be accepted back by society, normally live as good, law-abiding, and responsible citizens capable of playing an active role in development and providing protection to society from the repetition of criminal acts. To achieve the above objective, we design individual prison-based rehabilitation and reintegration based on a thorough assessment of each inmate. Prison-based rehabilitation and reintegration programs cover both the psychological and physical well-being of inmates to prepare them to reintegrate into the community upon release based on the need and risk assessment result. In Indonesia, we have an entrepreneurship program, workshop, craftsmanship, sewing skill, and other relevant skill for inmates upon release. In this opportunity, I would like to share our rehabilitation program in women's prison in Indonesia. We realize, although women make up a small percentage of the prison population, they face unique challenge as prison are generally not designed for women. Therefore, we have bolstered the program by refurbishing the batik workshop at women's prison in Semarang and providing a series of batik training program to inmates. With support from UNODC under the Doha Declaration Program and the Second Chain Foundation. Batik is one of the national heritage in Indonesia culture. Indonesia Batik was added to UNESCO Intangible Culture Heritage of Humanity list in 2009 and has been internationally recognized as a historical fabric of human civilization. The batik production has been closely embedded in Semarang local community, tradition, and culture. Women's prison in Semarang start providing batik production as a work training program in 2012 through assistance from Sanggar Batik Semarang. In 2015, the head of prison invite batik training instructor to teach inmate and officer on batik, making production for 20 sessions to ensure the program sustainability once the experienced inmates are released. This vocational training program aims to provide prisoners with adequate skills and knowledge in batik production for their life after rehabilitation. As mentioned earlier, choosing this particular program links correctly with the local community values. In a way, it will help smoothen the acceptance and reintegration process and fits into local needs. This program was also innovative in its approach to protecting the environment by taking an eco-friendly approach in the batik production cycle and design by prioritizing natural colorant. Through a 3-month-long program, the vocational training on batik production has increased the number of inmate proficient in the batik production process in Semarang Women Prison from 20 to 50 active inmates. I wish to take this opportunity to appreciate and thank our colleagues, the SGF and UNODC, for the cooperation and support that they have extended to DGC Indonesia for their contribution to enhancing the vocational training and work opportunities in traditional Indonesia batik production in women's prison in Semarang. In addition to the prison-based rehabilitation program for women's prisoners in Indonesia, we also give much attention and the issue of elderly prisoners. This group of prisoners requires special and intensive treatment due to their physical and mental decline. Still, their needs are sometimes overlooked, especially when they only represent a small proportion of the prison population. The DGC has paid special attention to this issue, among others, by providing special blocks for elderly prisoners that are equipped with the necessary facilities and infrastructure as well as suitable treatment programs. We strive to establish correctional system where elderly prisoners have constructive time out of their cell that enable them to work towards betterment, including maintaining physical and mental health. The treatment for elderly prisoners in Indonesia has been regulated through the regulation of Minister of Law and Human Rights. We are aware that the world population in general is rapidly aging. However, the prisoners' population is aging faster than the older population. These phenomena have increased vulnerabilities and health problems, which potentially will become the concern for most of prison administration in the world, sooner or later. We have also held an international seminar on the treatment of elderly prisoners in 2018, which produced the Jakarta Statement on the treatment of elderly prisoners. The Jakarta Statement is a recommendation from all countries and NGOs prison of the time that elderly prisoners need to receive treatment according to their needs. We have promoted the Jakarta Statement at both the national and international level with the hope of being welcomed by a wider audience and eventually set an international standard. Our correctional system believes in one central principle: how to improve the inmate life, living and livelihood by preparing and helping former inmate re-enter society so they can live productive life and avoid fall into former habits. By providing practical programs such as vocational training, we make it possible for the individual to leave prison with marketable skill for good steady job, as we see in the successful basic training program in Semarang Women Prison. Prison also need to provide extensive rehabilitation program that prepare the prisoners to develop their self-esteem and affect their ability to build confidence and social function, as we see in the elderly prisoner program in Indonesia. Lastly, I welcome now collaboration opportunities to increase cooperation with other countries and non-governmental organizations that can help us develop and strengthen our correctional system, explicitly developing prison-based rehabilitation and reintegration programs. Working together, I believe we can develop innovative rehabilitation and reintegration programs, enhance prison capacity to rehabilitate and reintegrate inmates, and create the strategy of the implementation, particularly during this period of uncertainty related to COVID-19. Finally, to close my remarks, I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and it was a great pleasure working over these past years with UDC as well as with the Second Chance Foundation in Indonesia, and look forward to future cooperation. The importance of the role of civil society in supporting a more rehabilitative approach to prison management is self-evident, and one of our key partners along our work has been Penal Reform International, and I'm pleased to share with you now the video message of Ms. Olivia, Executive Director of Penal Reform International. Sarah, please.
Thank you to everybody joining us today. It is a pleasure to be contributing to this discussion on behalf of Penal Reform International. We are an NGO that work globally to build effective criminal justice systems that do no harm and uphold human rights for all. Rehabilitation is really at the core of this mission. And so I'm very pleased today to share some of our experiences and lessons learned so that we can all together build systems that are more in line with rehabilitation principles and international standards. Rehabilitation is arguably the most important element for building an effective system, and the Nelson Mandela Rules are very clear that the primary purpose of imprisonment, which is to reduce recidivism and protect society, can only be achieved with rehabilitation. At the core of a rehabilitative approach is this idea that not only should somebody's time in prison or time serving a community sentence should do no harm, but it should actually improve their lives so that they can build a better life that is law-abiding and purposeful after their sentence. So bearing this in mind, I first want to touch on how the COVID pandemic has impacted the delivery of rehabilitation programs internationally, as we see that the crisis continues to varying degrees in all parts of the world. The restrictions on movement and contact with the outside world in prisons globally has really brought a change to daily life in prisons, but really importantly, and for today's topic, it has seen the suspension, often for very extensive periods, or continues to see these to training, educational and work programs. So for example, in a survey of all Latin American countries except El Salvador, 90% of prison systems had restricted educational activities, and over half of those prison systems had curtailed work programs. Mental well-being, physical health, and also rates of violence are all closely linked, and the evidence shows this. They're all closely linked to people in prison having purposeful activity. So therefore, it's no surprise that the suspension or restrictions on such rehabilitation and work programs has had a huge impact. In that same survey from Latin America, it was found that increased tension had been reported and increased violence in half of those settings, or more than half. Longer periods of detention have also been reported, as often decisions around release, for example, by parole boards, are closely linked to the successful completion of rehabilitation programs and so on. We've also documented that the mental health crisis that was existing in prisons prior to the pandemic in many countries has been exacerbated, with rates of self-harm and suicide rising in several countries where the data is available. And we know that this is closely linked with providing constructive activity. Studies have showed that activity reduces levels of depression and mental health conditions among people in prison. Also, day or temporary release schemes, which are often employed as a very critical and successful method of improving reintegration, has been impacted. So in Europe, many day release schemes were stopped for months, and where they did resume, there were many restrictions which made it difficult to implement. For people who went out on day release, they would have to go into quarantine when returning to prison. So there's many challenges, but we are very happy to see and welcome the many different innovations that these challenges have brought about. Prisons are working hard to ensure some form of rehabilitation in many parts of the world. And of course, technological advances has brought solutions and new partnerships. So, for example, in Ireland, people in Mountjoy Prison have been granted online access for the first time to courses at a university during the pandemic. In the US, the Cornell prison education program switched to a combination of email and teleconferencing. And many of these solutions are possible because of internet and resources and required boosting IT capabilities in prisons. But we know that because of the digital divide, many people in prison in other areas of the world have really been left behind. Another example of adapting to the crisis has been seen with new work programs set up to get people detained contributing to wider COVID response efforts through, for example, the production of face masks and other essential equipment. My organisation has set up such a program in Jordan, which has benefited not only the community, but also people detained who have received training and have been able to upskill, hopefully leading to better jobs opportunities when they are released. And some of the equipment, of course, was able to be used in the prison itself. I think that these sorts of initiatives and these innovations really need to be garnered for longer term improvement to rehabilitation programs. We need to think outside of the square. And this is an issue that has been high on the agenda since the last Congress when the Doha Declaration was adopted. Beyond the pandemic, we have learnt a lot from our work in building rehabilitation programs with prison and probation authorities. And I want to share a few considerations around how we ensure that everybody is included and these can be most effective. The first point is that rehabilitation programs need to be individualized. So what works in one prison or for one group may not be effective for another. We need to look at how programs can be adapted specifically for certain groups, for example, older persons, youth, boys, girls, minorities, people serving long or life sentences. All of these groups have different needs, and rehabilitation programs need to take them into account. In saying that, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. There have been many programs developed for specific groups, and they've been tried and tested, including by PRI and UNODC. So these programs should be looked to, drawn on, and replicated where appropriate to ensure that programs can be rolled out in an effective way for different groups. Secondly, only a holistic approach to rehabilitation works. If you do not have the basic necessities, for example, to healthcare, then perhaps a program on training or upskilling may not be so effective. So we need to look at how other aspects of the prison regime or system need to be reformed with a view of rehabilitation. It cuts across all of the Mandela Rules and all of the Bangkok Rules rehabilitation. It's a cross-cutting issue. And so we mustn't have tunnel vision when thinking about rehabilitation. And this links into my third point, which is that a broader strategy needs to be adopted. So rehabilitation needs to be embedded in policies, laws, practices across the board based on a national strategy, and it needs to have the full support of politicians and policymakers. And this then in turn ensures adequate resourcing, adequate equipment to ensure the longer term sustainability. Programs should also be based on consultations with the people that are using them. So consultations with people detained or under community sanctions. Then you can take into account their ideas for developing or improving existing ones. And also any training or work program should think about market needs so that those programs can lead to employment, which is the ultimate goal, obviously, with many of them. Programs should be based on international standards. And here I note the Mandela Rules, the Bangkok Rules, and also the Tokyo Rules. There's a lot of guidance out there on how to implement these rules in terms of rehabilitation, including by PRI and UNODC. And a couple of tools to mention are PRI's guidance documents on the Mandela and the Bangkok Rules, and UNODC's quite recent handbook on classification of prisoners. Classification goes hand in hand with rehabilitation, so it is an essential tool in that regard. Also, programs must be gender sensitive, and here, of course, the Bangkok Rules are an important reference. Women and girls often have less varied or less access to rehabilitation programs, and so extra efforts need to be made made to make sure that this group are not left behind. They make up a minority in terms of the prison population, but they're and so in that way they've often been sort of forgotten rehabilitation strategies. There's a lot of guidance out there again on how to ensure that women and girls do get included and have the right type of programs, including by PRI and the Thailand Institute of Justice as our part of our toolbox on the Bangkok Rules. Finally, last but certainly not least, non-custodial sanctions are proven to be more effective in addressing criminal behaviour. And so any rehabilitation strategy should recognise this and ensure that community sanctions and measures are preferred over a prison sentence. The Tokyo rules give us clear guidance in that direction, but with the number of people in prison rising year on year, as we document every year, we really need to put efforts into turning around that trend urgently. It's important to note that programs in the community are not only more effective, but often cheaper than prison sentences. And going back to this principle about doing no harm, they go a long way in ensuring that criminal justice systems fulfill their purpose by rebuilding lives rather than harming them through unnecessary and expensive prison sentences. Especially at times like this, we need to rethink about how we're using prison, and we should put rehabilitation front and centre in decisions around sentencing. Where it's decided that prison sentences are a must, they should be rehabilitative in every sense. And one final thought that has actually some urgency in that it's relevant today is during the ongoing pandemic, measures to prevent or address COVID outbreaks in prisons, they must be guided by international standards. And this means that any rehabilitation or work program must be proportionate and time-bound, and it must only be restricted if strictly necessary based on health grounds. I hope that these remarks give some helpful pointers to building successful rehabilitation programs. Again, just to conclude, rehabilitation should really be at the centre of any decision involving detention or a non-custodial sanction and be part of the whole regime of prison life. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you in the weeks, months, and years coming ahead.
Thank you to Olivia and Keynote International for that statement. And that brings us basically to the concluding part of the event. And for that, I would like to invite Mr. Marco Teixeira, the Senior Coordinator of the Global Program, to take the floor for the concluding remarks. Marco, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Alejandro. Good afternoon from Kyoto. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to address you today at the closing of this ancillary meeting at the UN 14th United Nations Congress on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. And in 2015, a few months before the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Doha Declaration was unanimously adopted with, I would say, a forward-looking vision on seeking to implement comprehensive policies and programs that promotes rule of law and obviously provides also a platform for technical assistance being provided to the member states. Within its focus on crime prevention, criminal justice and rule of law as drivers of sustainable development, the Congress in Kyoto has brought to the world together at the beginning of the decade of action to deliver on the 2030 Agenda. The Kyoto Declaration stresses the commitment and political will of the member states on implementing comprehensive and obviously effective crime prevention and criminal justice policies and strategies, which promotes the rule of law at national and international levels. As it was done with the Doha Declaration, the challenge we face now is how to turn the Kyoto Declaration into action. I'm encouraged by the determination of the member states and the experience that we have acquired so far since the last Congress that translated the Doha Declaration into action with concrete and tangible results. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard today, ensuring a secure and safe custody of prisoners, proactively support their successful rehabilitation and social reintegration is one of the core missions of prisons administrations. Yet, numerous challenges are linked with that objective. It is in everyone's interest that prisoners to return to their own communities better equipped to live and live their lives as law-abiding citizens. UNODC is internationally recognized as a leader in the field of prison management, including also the capacity to deliver high-quality technical assistance based on the staff expertise and obviously the experience so far. Over the past years, UNODC has been supporting countries in developing programs in the three core areas of education, vocational training, and work in prison settings, in the view and with the perspective of contributing to employability and social reintegration of prisoners upon release. A couple of concrete examples of our joint handovers with member states were also highlighted by the previous panelists. Efforts to make societies more resilient to crime and to promote social cohesion and the rule of law are obviously aspects that the national community cannot disregard, and obviously the ones in prison are also part of our key priorities and beneficiaries of our actions. Prisoners continue to be part of our societies and must be treated with respect for their inherent dignity as human beings. All UN efforts to address global prison challenges are based on international human rights conventions and UN standards and norms in crime prevention and criminal justice, taking into account the needs to have a gender-responsive approaches that actually address the needs of special groups or groups with special needs. International standards recall the importance for penitentiary systems to include measures to foster prison social rehabilitation, and investment in the correspondent programs for prisoners are considered efficient actions, and obviously they have an impact on reducing reoffending and obviously contributing to reduction of prison overcrowding. UNODC is proud to act as a custodian of Nelson Mandela Rules, which provide universally recognized blueprint for good prison management and the treatment of prisoners. The global program has proven its effectiveness and achieved highest possible outcome in supporting the Sustainable Development Agenda, and as the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic did not prevent the program to continue to deliver its work, including in prison setting. Prisons are part of the larger criminal justice system, and they play a critical role in maintaining the safety of societies. More importantly, they can contribute to create and maintaining a peaceful and inclusive societies by upholding the rule of law and also ensuring appropriate rights-based treatment of prisoners and offering opportunities for their rehabilitation aligned with the goal 16 of the Sustainable Development Agenda that focus on peace, justice, and strong institutions. All through numerous prison administrations are committed to offer prison rehabilitation programs to prisoners while in custody. They often face obstacles, challenges when it comes to its effective implementation, such as financial and human resources constraints. Under the global program that I lead, with the fantastic team that works on prison rehabilitation, with the financial support of the state of Qatar, UNODC has supported the prisons administration of a selected group of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America in the implementation of prison-based rehabilitation programs through infrastructural support, equipment, training, and technical advice. Furthermore, as part of the technical advice, UNODC has developed several global tools to build the knowledge and skills of criminal justice practitioners and policymakers worldwide. None of this could be possible without the vision and the support of the State of Qatar that enable our program and the prison rehabilitation component to materialize its actions in assistance of the different member states. Today, and before I conclude, is International Women's Day, and I want also to acknowledge the inspiration of several women and colleagues that are in our lives, and I wish them to enjoy that special day. At this occasion, I want to reiterate our gratitude to the State of Qatar for their support, for their policy support, and obviously we are committed to continue this strategic partnership and continue our work under the upcoming new initiatives in the prison context and settings, and obviously continue to contribute to a peaceful and more inclusive society. Thank you very much to all of you for sharing your time with us, and Alejandro, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco, for your concluding remarks. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I too wish to thank you for joining us today and wish you an excellent rest of the week in this 14th UN Crime Congress. And to conclude, I leave you with two short videos showcasing the human stories of two former offenders from Indonesia and from Namibia that have managed to turn their lives around thanks to the support of rehabilitative programs such as the ones developed by the Global Program. I thank you very much for your attention, and Sarah, if you can then play them back to back, the two videos. Thank you and goodbye.
Nama saya Silianti. Aku dulu pernah di sini. Kita yang baru mantan dari sini, masyarakat memandang kita negatif. Karena setelah ada pembinaan di sini, terus keluar, dan dengan keahlian membatik, aku bikin usaha batik. Saya sekarang berkecimpung di bidang batik. Kalau membatik pada dasarnya harus telaten ya. Dengan aku punya usaha membatik, jadi image masyarakat ke akunya udah beda. Semua orang punya kesalahan. Aku berharap kalau aku datang, teman-teman, oh ya, Mbak Asi bisa, kenapa aku nggak bisa? Semua orang bisa menghakimi kita, tapi tidak semua orang berhak menghakimi masa depan kita.
My name is Mateo Sangeta. I'm staying here in Winchuk. I spent 12 years in prison. When I went there, I realized that there is a different program. I decided to apply to the workshop. I learned you can do it. I learned different things, like when you stay with people, you must respect each other like you respect yourself. If always you just following a bad friend, you will find yourself in trouble, like a prison. Those kind of things, it's very encouraging. I just work hard. I get my certificate in plumbing and pipe fitting.
He got a job now as a plumber at the Ministry of Justice.
I'm very proud of him. He's hardworking, he's intelligent, especially the part of plumbing.
I'm feeling good because now, every end of the month, I'm getting a salary.
He just told me that if it wasn't because of the Namibian Correctional Service, I don't know where I would be now.
To be in prison is not the end of the world, but you must change your behavior. When one day you come outside, then you become a new person.